So packaging for SaaS products. Here's how you do it. There are two ways that you can do packaging for SaaS products. One I would call bottom-up and data-driven, and the other one I would call top-down and conceptually driven. I'm going to walk you through both ways, at least how I do them for my clients, and then talk a little bit about how I use them together to create an even stronger process. This insight that negative and positive emotion are two different things. They're not just one thing with a big scale going from plus to minus. And then, well, that's your premium features. And these are the ones that differentiate your basic tier from your premium tier. The whole point of packaging is to do price discrimination between customers. Is trying to figure out what do they want to buy, what do they want to buy. Here's what I usually do with combining these two types of methodologies in actual client work, which is but before we go into the packaging details, let's just spend 20 seconds on why we do packaging. And the answer is pretty simple. We do it to make more money, right? And the way we make more money with packaging is we use it to price discriminate customers. So we charge different prices from different customers because not all customers want all of your product, right? So some customers, if they were to buy all the product, they wouldn't know what to do with it. They would ask for discounts. They say, well, you're giving me 100 features. I only need 20, so I would like an 80% discount, and so forth. So not everyone gets to ride business class. Somebody just wants to ride coach because they don't care about the champagne and the whatever it is you get in business class, right? So that's fine. You can have the same underlying capability and deliver different experiences and versions of your product to different customers, thereby tapping into those different market segments with the appropriate pricing. That's all packaging is. It's just a way for you to get at the customers. It doesn't have anything to do with intrinsically your product as such or the solution. It is the way it is delivered to different customers. The first way that you can do packaging is to do bottom-up or data-driven packaging. And there are a lot of ways to do this. But I'm going to walk you through the most simple one that can be conducted with one survey that I think most of you could use and most of you are, let's say, unaware exists. So it basically runs like this. You do an inventory of all of your features. So I would do three types of features: all the functional features, all the service features, and all the commercial features. So all the functional features are not the can export CSV, can export this, can export that. It's like, it is the answer to a question that your customer would ask, which is, well, does it have exports? And you say, well, yes, it has all the exports. So you're more, when describing a feature, go more for like a high-level selling point, like a bullet point on your pricing page, rather than like describing 50 or 100 different functionality components of your product. Go for like 8 to 12 high-level functional features. For service features, it's something like premium onboarding, support 24/7, 365, whatever it is. It can also be, well, we can do the migration for you, whatever it is. So everything I usually say in service features is the things that you do to help the customer use all the functional features, right? So support isn't something they want in and of itself, but it's a guarantee or certainty that the customer has that you will help them extract value from the functional side of the solution that you deliver. The commercial features, last, are the payment terms, the cancellation terms, everything that goes into terms and conditions. So the way that you structure a commercial deal around what they're buying. Take all of these and now realize the following. Negative and positive emotion isn't the same thing that goes from a scale from 0 to plus and from 0 to negative. Negative emotion are essentially two different things, right? So you're dealing with two scales from, neutral to excited and positive and, I want that. And a negative going from neutral to, I, really would hate that. And this insight that negative and positive emotion are two different things, they're not just one thing with a big scale going from plus to minus, has been iterated over all through, the 50s, 1950s. So almost like 80 years ago. I think it was a guy called Herzberg that first did the motivation studies with what does employees, why do employees get motivated? And he basically figured out that something was hygiene factors, like, people would like to have like a nice working environment, but it's only going to be something that if they have a nice working environment, they're not motivated, they're just not demotivated. But if they have like a worthwhile task that really makes them want to go to work, like they're bringing a space station to Mars or something, that is something that really motivates people. And if they don't have a worthwhile task, they're not unhappy, they're just neutral, right? So you can see, let's say in NGO jobs, you have a lot of really motivating factors like, well, we're doing it for the cause and the purpose, and that's why we're showing up. But also a lot of the hygiene factors that was what he'd call it, wasn't there. Like the pay wouldn't be very good, and the working environment wouldn't be very good, and so forth. So there's a lot of stressors as well. So in some jobs, like the NGO jobs, at least the stereotypical one, you would have a lot of impact both on the high positive side and also on the negative side. So you'd have a lot of hygiene factors that weren't there, like the pay would suck and so forth, and also a lot of the positives would really work out. As compared to, let's say, a boring office job where everything is just fine, right? So why are we doing this job? Like, I don't know, but the pay is good and the food is good at lunch and so forth, right? So there you have very little effect on either the positive or the negative side. And it's looking at these two factors that really was an insight by Hirschberg. And then later, I think in the 80s, got picked up by a Japanese business school professor called Kano. So Kano invented something called the Kano model. And essentially he said, okay, you're going to take all the features that you just did the inventory of, and then you're going to survey your prospective customers or clients, asking them two different types of questions for each feature. And you can Google Kano model survey and sort of figure out like how to sort of structure it. But essentially it's this. One type of question is, how strongly would you feel if this feature was in the product? So let's say that, well, we are going to have the, AI data migration. And then you essentially go from 0 to 5. This is a positive thing, so it's there. And then another version of that question is sort of the negative emotion question, which is, how would you feel if this feature was not in the product? And then you go on a scale. So essentially what he's trying to do is to say, well, if it is there, how are you feeling about it versus if it isn't there? And really this sort of contrast between presence and not presence is what gets at these sort of, oh, I like that and I have value for it, or I dislike and I don't have value for that. And what we can see is that if we take the positive emotion, which is the feature is there, and map it on a I don't care either way to, hey, I care a lot, and we take the negative emotion, which is, well, I don't care versus I care a lot if it isn't there, and we map them out, we get a little sort of 2x2 diagram, and then we can say, well, okay, so there are going to be features that fall in the I care a lot if it's there and if it's not there, and I care a lot if it's not there or there, and so forth. So you get this little 2x2 diagram on, we'll say where one axis is the strength of the response on a scale of 1 to 5 if the feature was there, and the other axis is on a strength from 1 to 5 if the feature was not there, right? So if you go 5-5, then that's aversion. If you go 1-1, then nobody cares about anything if it's there or not, right? So, you just take this matrix and you slice it into sort of 4 quadrants, and then we can say, well, in each of these quadrants, we can sort of tell what the features are and how they should appear in your packaging, right? So let's start with the obvious one first. No reaction in any way, right? So that is just where features are becoming indifferent, right? So let's say on a scale from 1 to 5, it doesn't score higher than 2 with most of the customers, right? So nobody really cares if it's there, and nobody really cares if it's not there, right? So why are you having this feature, right? It's literally is that you could take it out and nobody would notice. You could put it in, nobody would notice, right? So it's just taking up space, and you should just get rid of it, or at least not advertise that it's there, right? It can just like blend into the rest of the functionality, and you don't need to worry about it anymore. Now, the features where people said, well, if it's not there, I would have a really strong reaction to this. But if it is there, they would not have a strong reaction to it. So it's like, yeah, sure. Like, so let's go something with like a lot of security features, right? So it's like, would you care if this software was not secure at all? Like, yeah, I would care a lot. Like, I need my data to be secure in your software. And then conversely, you ask, would you care if this software was secure? And you'd be like, yeah, not really. Like, I just assume that it is included in it. And this is what that quadrant is for. It is for the must-haves. It is for all the basic features that must be in every package, right? So it's the ones that if the customer isn't getting it, they're just going to get a strong negative reaction, but they don't have a strong positive buy reaction either. So this is just the features that you need to show you have, but you can't sell them. They aren't generating any demand. Now, the top, where they have strong reactions in both ends, these are your premium features. They're the differentiators, right? So these are the ones where you're saying, well, if you, according to the Kano theory, I actually tend to disagree a little bit. So these are the ones where we say, if we didn't have this, would you care? And they say yes. And we said, well, if we did have this, would you care? And they would say yes. And then, well, that's your premium features. And these are the ones that differentiate your basic tier from your premium tier. Okay, great. So now you already have the features that should be in your basic tier and the ones that should be in the premium tier. Okay, now last quadrant are the ones where if the features are not there, so you're saying, well, if this feature wasn't there, would you care? They're like, nah. But then is the feature there? They would actually care a lot. These are your add-ons. So these are the features where you say, well, would you like this? And there's, yes, it drives a lot of demand, but if you don't include it in any of your basic tiers, the core product that you're delivering, you aren't deterring any customers from buying. So this is the most basic feature selection survey tool that's out there that really sort of ties well into the way that you would package a SaaS product, right? So you ask these, make an inventory of the features, you ask these survey questions, you run it out to respondents, you get it back, and then you plot it into the diagram of, let's say, strength of emotion on the it's there, it's not there front, and then you get sort of a rough idea of what you shouldn't bother about, what's the core basic features, what are the premium features, and what are the add-ons. Okay, so far so good. I will comment a little bit about what I think about the Kano model, but after I go with the second way of packaging, which is what I call the top-down version. And the top-down version essentially is to package around jobs to be done. And jobs to be done was invented by a Harvard Business School professor called Clayton Christensen. He died a few years ago, but he's been like a wellspring of really cool ideas that have really changed the way we think about business. So he was also the father of the concept of disruption. I think disruption is sort of what he's most known for. Like everybody talks about disruption. Clayton was the one who wrote the book and laid out the theory. But I think actually a larger contribution of his is this concept of a job. And the story goes about how he invented jobs theory is that he was working as, I think was a partner of McKinsey. And they were doing a project for McDonald's. And McDonald's was trying to sell more milkshakes. And McDonald's had done a lot of statistical analysis of product features and customer features. So they would say customer features you can imagine, like demographics, age groups, gender, what kind of credit card they use, what kind of car they drive, all these things that McDonald's would know about their customers. And then on the product feature side, they would have, well, the degree that the milkshake is sweet, or the chunkiness, or the temperature, or the size of the milkshake, and so forth. And they had done all sorts of elaborate statistical analysis on, well, what is sort of the optimum milkshake product configuration to sell to the optimal type of customer, right? But they hadn't really broken through. They had been able to do like minor tweaks and improvements and so forth, but really they hadn't been able to sort of find anything that really would like take home the market for milkshakes. So Clayton and his team realized this, and then they, at sort of a last-ditch effort, almost said, well, okay, let's try to talk to customers, right? So instead of just like organizing all the data we have around them, let's actually try and talk to them and ask them when they buy a milkshake and they walk out the store, we stop them and say, well, why did you buy that milkshake? And how do you like it? And what other things were you considering buying and so forth? And they did this. Then they found out that the actual sort of the demographic for buying milkshakes, it turns out, are men in like their 30s and 40s. Who would have known, right? But that's it. And they usually buy them in the morning and in the afternoon. They ask these guys, why are you buying milkshake? And in the mornings they would say, well, so I have a long commute to work. And I'm bored because it takes a long time. And maybe I'm a little hungry, so I need a snack. And so I go to McDonald's and I could get coffee, or I could get a banana, or I could get something else. But I'm going to go for the milkshake because, well, it lasts a long time, and I'm a little full. And after I eat or drink the milkshake, and that's it. It does the give me something to eat and keep me entertained for an hour while I drive. That's sort of what I'm trying to solve. So coffee lasts an hour, but I'm not full. I'm hungry when I arrive at work. And like a banana is like messy to eat in the car, and maybe something you not safe, and it's like over in 2 minutes, right? So the milkshake is sort of what I'm opting for to solve this job. And that's sort of the idea of the job, is that there is a clear intent with something that I'm trying to get done in a situation. Fast forward 8 or 9 hours, same afternoon, same guy comes into the same McDonald's. Now he has 2 kids in the backseat. And so he just picked them up, and he's going to go on his way home. And the kids are kids, so they're all over the place. And he is trying to bribe them with McDonald's. And he's saying, okay, kids, I'm going to give you a milkshake. And then, you give dad like 20 minutes to, make a phone call or wrap up his day or whatever, just peace of mind. And that's the transaction I'm going to try to make with my kids. The idea here is that it's not the same milkshake that guy needs in both situations, because he's trying to solve a different job. So in the morning, he would like his milkshake to be cold, thick, large, and maybe even chunky. And maybe not that sweet, actually, right? It's the exact opposite product selection or feature selection that he would like in the afternoon. Because the kids, if you give it like a 5-year-old a large, very cold, very chunky, not so sweet milkshake, they're going to sit there for an hour trying to drink that milkshake. And really what you just want it to be not messy, like, and over in like 10 minutes, because that's the kind of break you need. So they figured out to just do they actually ditched the whole analysis of who the customer is and what they would say, and sort of figured out that the customers would respond also to surveys in, let's say, depending on what kind of job they were hiring the milkshake to do for them, depending on what situation they were in. So, okay, long story, which is sometimes the analysis of product features and customer attributes and survey responses really just takes us into the weeds, because we're neglecting to ask the core question, which is, what is the customer trying to solve? Like, why are they here? What are they buying? Are they buying like a break? That's their morning, or are they buying another type of break for their kids, which is another type of product? So I usually do this with packaging. Like, okay, we have all the features, so we do the same inventory of the commercial features and the service features and the functional features, and that's fine. Like, take it, like, we still need to sort of package that into packages or modules or whatever, but let's put it aside for a little while. And then just ask ourselves, what is the core demand driver that is getting customers through the door? What are they trying to get done? And maybe that is, well, everybody is wanting to talk to us about predictive maintenance because, that's a really big component of our product. Great. Okay. Let's create the first package that we have and call it predictive maintenance. And then we go and look at all our product features, all the functional features and service features and so forth, and just say, what is the optimal selection of features that solves predictive maintenance? And then you take those features in and you do that. And that is your first package. And that is what I call the point of first demand. So what you're really doing is you're trying to construct an offering that just really resonates with the demand generation and the marketing and the leads that you have to be able to sort of close that sale. And what's happening here is that you can take the job, the solution, and the problem that you're packaged around, and then you can start to ask yourself, what is this worth to the customer, right? And this is when I'm going to go into sort of comparing the two models, right? Because that is really difficult to do over in the Kano model and the breakdown of features, where you're saying, well, we have all these must-have features that scored in this quadrant of the survey, and you just pull them out, and then you're saying, well, what would a customer want to pay for these? And you have no idea, because this is a product-centric way to look at it. It's just like, okay, I now have 7 features that are in this quadrant. What's that worth to anyone? You don't know, because you don't know what they're using them for. You don't know why they're buying those features. And without that connection, what you're trying to do is you're trying to price the product instead of actually trying to price the customer, which is what we're doing, right? The whole point of packaging is to do price discrimination between customers. It's trying to figure out, what do they want to buy? What do they want to buy? So the whole idea of doing data-driven and survey-driven and preference-driven and usage-based packaging is fine if you also remember to ask, why are they doing it? So what I usually do is, let's do the jobs process first. Let's figure out what the core job to be done is. That's the point of first demand, and let's package around that well. Don't care about if you pulling in your most advanced and like premium features into this sort of most basic package. That's fine. It's going to help you because people really want this, right? And then you can generate value in this offer. And then you ask yourself the question, if I solve this for my customer, the first job that they walk through the door with, predictive maintenance, let's say, what would their next job then be? And then you can say something like, well, if we solve predictive maintenance, then the next job would be something like getting into operations and doing operations optimization. Okay, great, right? Okay, now we have the biggest, let's say, obstacle for the performance of my customer removed, which is what they're looking for, which is like everything breaks down. So we want to do predictive maintenance. And then once we solve that and minimize that problem, then the next problem in their sort of to-do list, we think becomes operations management. Okay, so what can we then do with operations management that from our feature stack that really would form a package and build upon this? And maybe we need to come up with new features. Like we say, okay, if we need to solve operations management, we would need to create a dashboard that does this or a functionality that did that. Great, now you're innovating the product. That's what it is, right? But each time you're innovating around sources of demand. You're saying, what is the customer trying to get done? How can I deliver on that? This is usually what you'll see is that once you've started to ask a series of these questions, and this is a design task. This isn't a quant-driven data analysis task. This is a design work where you're trying to say, well, I'm trying to understand my customer and what they're doing, and then I'm trying to sort of fit something to them. So it's like designing a chair. When they sit in it, they will know if it's good or bad, right? And you can have an idea, knowing customers and knowing how they sit, if this is good or bad. But there isn't anything called an optimal chair. Like, well, what the hell is that, right? But there's a good chair and a bad one. And that's good enough for our purpose, right? So usually they will form some sort of a development axis. So let's say that you're going to go with, I'm just designing a piece of software for energy traders right now. And we can say, well, our point of first demand is, well, we want this data in. And then we can say, well, the next one is, usually if we solve this, we want to be able to do some advanced modeling with the data. And once we solve this, we will be able to do some advanced modelings in larger teams with the data and share all the models and work on them collaboratively. Okay, so now we have some sort of an axis along our product, an expansion axis that goes along customer sophistication and maturity. And that's usually sort of how you'll see these things play out, is that if you start with the point of first demand, what are the customer looking for when they walk through my door? And then what is the next issue and the next issue and the next issue? That is usually where you will have your expansion axis. This is where you say, well, customer will grow across this axis in a certain conceptual way as we solve each problem for them. And some customers will walk through the door and already be sort of up the chain. They will already be sophisticated, so they will need this kind of problem. The problem with jobs to be done is that it's fussy, right? And if you go and Google jobs to be done theory, you will find a lot of people after Clayton Christensen who have tried to break it down into like a data-driven exercise. They will say, well, we have done like survey methodologies and interview methodologies and trying to essentially take all of that and break it down into, let's say, calculatable, quantifiable measurements of jobs to be done. And you can do that to some degree. But if you get lost and you just, you can't see the wood for the trees, then you're missing the point, right? And I think there is also a point in that, like Clayton Christensen had, I think 10, 15 years before he died, working with jobs to be done theory, working with a lot of PhD and grad students and other professors, and he never actually developed a quantifiable framework to do jobs theory. And I think it's because, to some extent, it's actually inappropriate, right? Because there is such a tendency to take the data-driven approach and just lean on it too heavily, like because numbers don't lie, right? That's the idea. So if we just do all the work and then we'll get the answer, and it removes some anxiety and responsibility from us as decision makers and designers of our product, because we can rely on the data. This is also why consultants love this a lot, because they can say, well, we ran all this analysis and we have reams and reams of data and we did all the things and we did like 200 jobs to be done interviews, and here's the quantifiable output, and you can see all the diagrams, right? That's great for selling large-scale consultancy projects. It's not necessarily great for creating SaaS products that sell. And you can read the original book. I think it's called Competing Against Luck. And actually, it's all about understanding the conceptual side of this, and actually not a lot. I think there isn't any quantifiable measurements of this. And this isn't because they weren't good at that stuff. That's just because they think, well, that's the wrong approach to try to get at something like this. Here's what I usually do with combining these two types of methodologies in actual client work, which is we do the inventories of features to sort of get an understanding of what it is that we're dealing with. And then we do jobs processes. We're saying, okay, what are the customers buying? And sometimes it is as simple as that. And we, 2 hours of like a high level conversation with the right people in an organization can sort of like clarify, what are we buying here? What are we selling? Why are they getting to us, the customers? And we do point of first demand, and we do sort of, next demand source. We clarify an access. Then we look at features. We sort of select them in. Maybe we come with some new features, and that's great. And then sometimes if we have the capacity to do it, or we get good survey volume and so forth, we will also run a Kano survey, or there are others like conjoint survey or MaxDiff survey or whatever they're called, to get at feature preferences and sort of strength of these things. But in reality, it rarely matters that much, because it is sort of unconnected from the marketing side, the demand side, and from the narrative side and so forth. So usually what you'll end up with is sanity checking the jobs, let's say the qualitative part with the quantitative part, right? So let's say that you came up with a jobs-driven packaging, and then you ran a Kano survey, and you just couldn't make the two mesh, right? Then you have a problem, right? Usually what should happen is that the kind of features that you put in are the ones that should also get sort of backed up by survey data. And then you can run out and you can run validation interviews and other things to sort of understand why. But in reality, I mostly use the data-driven approach to validate at a certain step the jobs-driven packaging. And also, it can actually also, another approach is it can be relatively good at figuring out roadmap features, right? So if we have 10 features that we don't know what to do with, and we'll say, well, we could go for the enterprise single sign-on, or this like the end-to-end encryption thing, or we could go with the whatever other widget feature that we're thinking about. Running counter surveys to sort of really get them out and sort of figuring out, well, is this something that people expect us to already have, or is it something that would really sort of, drive premium demand, or is it something that would work better as an add-on? Like some customers would really like it, but they wouldn't care if we didn't have it. And then we can start to use the survey methodology as an input to driving roadmap. But I think it doesn't make sense if you don't have this underlying jobs-driven packaging at the bottom of it to try to figure out, why are we developing these features? What is it that we're trying to help the customer get done with the features? This is usually how I run packaging. And it's different from if you go to Simon Kucher or McKinsey or Bain or any of these types of consultants, because again, they are paid by the hour. So if they can put a team on, like cracking on developing big data sets and doing a lot of analysis on them and showing you something, one, you can't tell that they didn't go to do the job. It's sort of considered best practice. It's, you know, the data's right there and so on and so forth. And you feel like you're doing a lot of work. But I would just argue that you haven't done the actual conceptual work of figuring out what the customer wants. So start there and then use the other as an add-on.